Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Keep Indiana Learning. My name is Tim Arnold, and I'm very excited to be here today with my co-host, Brenny Coomer, and fellow innovation coaches, Nicole Nelson and Amy Stevens. This is episode 10, our final episode in our dual book study discussing AI in education. In this book study series, we've done a deep dive into the books Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick and AI for Educators by Matt Miller. And whether you're here with us live today or you join us later on the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube channel, we're here to explore both of these books because we know as AI becomes increasingly integrated into society, it's crucial for educators to understand the potential to enhance teaching and learning while being mindful of its limitations. So today in our dual book study format, we'll be looking at chapters 6 and 7 from Matt Miller's AI for Educators. Before we dive in to our conversation, let's do some introductions. Brenny, would you like to start us off?
Sure thing. So hi, everyone. I'm Brenny Coomer. I'm the Assistant Director of EdTech in Bartholomew Consolidated Schools in Columbus, Indiana. I do a lot in supporting learning management systems, e-learning, virtual learning, blended learning, and UDL. And AI is a particular interest of mine, so it's been really fun to be a part of this book study, and especially in our final episode, it's been a fun journey. I'm on the Indiana Connected Educators Board as the president-elect, and very much a part of this Keep Indiana Learning crew.
Yay! Oh, go ahead.
I'm Nicole Nelson. I am the District Integrated Learning Coordinator at Lewis Cass Schools. I've been in education for 25 years, primarily as a early childhood education K-1. And I have been in my current role for the past 4 years, helping teachers integrate technology in meaningful ways that increase student engagement. I have been a innovation coach for the last 3 years, and am also on the Indiana Connected Educators Board with Brenny.
Yay! Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Stevens, K-5 Project Lead the Way launch teacher for Tri-Elementary in Strawn, Indiana. I also serve our staff as the Technology Integration Specialist. I've been in education for 20 years, primarily K-5, and I've been in my current role for the past 5 years, helping teachers use technology, learn more about technology. I think one of the neatest things about this group that you have today is that we can probably still smell the Ditto ink on our fingers, yet here we are talking about AI, right? I'm lucky to say that I've been an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning for the past few years, as well as currently serving as an Apple Distinguished Educator. Super excited to be here and to have this conversation today.
Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Tim Arnold. I'm a district e-learning specialist with Richmond Community Schools. I've been doing that for 9 years after 26 years in the classroom. So if you're doing the math, I'm the old guy here in this group. I was a 7 through 12 social studies educator, currently an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning, and I serve as a member of the HEC board as well. So as you heard mentioned, this is our last and final episode in this book study. So we're going to insert the sad face emoji right here, and then we're just going to keep on going. So here's an opening question for the panel that'll kind of lead us into the topics that Matt Miller discussed. So how do you, as an AI user, maintain your voice in your written, spoken, and creative work?
Notice we're speechless. No, I just bring the giggle out because this is a good question. You know, I mean, we are all working with other teachers. We ourselves are working with each other to try to really, truly better understand AI and its power and its capabilities. And so while we're trying to understand that, we're also trying to understand how to best, educate students on best practices to use it. So as we ourselves are using this, I mean, for me, a lot of it is that trial and error. Did that point come across the way I wanted it to? Does that sound like me? I tried AI one of the very first times by writing a letter of recommendation. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to put in the prompt, and then I'm going to collapse the tab. And then I went to a piece of paper and I wrote out what I would really say. And then I pulled the tab back up and I compared them side to side to be like, does this really sound like me?
Mhm.
And, it was super fascinating, and just a really neat way of learning more about the quality of your prompt and the speed at which AI is advancing to get to know the specific human it's working with or group of humans it's working with. But yeah, I'm excited to hear what others have to say.
I would say like similar to what Amy had said. And I love this question because I think it's really a really good one. And I think it's important that we pause and ask ourselves this often when we're using AI, and then just model that for our students too. I find myself, there's certain tasks that I like to use AI for, and other ones where I don't like to use it for it. And when I say don't like it, it's kind of some of those like ethical things that I still want it to be me, and I still feel like that's where I draw the line. And I loved a particular section of Ethan Mollick's book where he kind of discussed that, like things that you automate, things that you delegate, and things that you just keep to you. So I think the more practice you get with these tools and tinkering with them, you learn really quickly what it's good at and what it's not. I saw someone refer to AI the other day as like a parrot with a library card. Like it's really good at looking through things and finding resources and regurgitating them, but it's not a human being, and it's not going to have those elements of your humor and who you are in the writing. So I think that's something I try to keep in mind. I don't love using AI for like writing emails to people. Honestly, I know a lot of people do that, but I don't. If it's like a general newsletter type of email, then I'll use it. But I still want it to come across as me, and people know how I sound on emails, probably more exclamation points than what's necessary, occasional emojis, which AI is doing some of those things now. So maybe they can't tell the difference, but I know the difference. So that's kind of where I like to frame things, is where do I still want to use it and where do I not? And where do I feel like it's important that it has my authentic touch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked the point in the book where Matt asked this question, the section of the book, and he was kind of like, is my tone coming through? Is the way that I would say it coming through? Is the message still me? And kind of drew, that's kind of how he defined where he would draw the line. I agree, though. I often will say, I'm trying to say this, these are the points that I want to make. Can you polish this up? And so I often have like a back and forth kind of thing going when I'm in working with whatever AI tool that I happen to be using.
Yeah, I would echo for sure what I've heard you say. Now, first of all, I got to say, Brenny, that was a T-shirt quote right there, a parrot quote. I wrote that down. I hope you couldn't tell I was writing something down. That's what I was doing. But to reiterate what you said, what I heard all three of you say is that you started some part of the process yourself. And I think to me that's important to me as well. I have to have some input originally, because then I can really get to that thing that sounds or thinks or feels like I would do it. And I think that's a really important point for teachers to hear about their students. That I like to think of students using AI as there's got to be some ticket or entry level for them to get to it. Some bit of original or personal work that leads to that first experience with AI or each experience with AI. And I think that we're going to talk a little bit about that stuff as we look here at chapter 6, which is entitled Acting Responsibly in an AI Integrated World. So who's got something from chapter 6 that really stood out to them or made them say,
Honestly, I know we were talking about like learning it ourselves and, just like what resources are available and so forth. And I really love how Matt Miller was able to lift up just some quick, easy places to go, like the UNESCO Code of Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. And I love how he just says, check it out, ask questions, dig for answers. Like, I love that. I didn't know really that was a thing until I knew that it was a thing. And then there's some really good guiding questions in here that allow us that, as I mentioned earlier, are still learning about data collecting and, training a machine, like what that really means. And so it was just super insightful and educational for me in chapter 6 to kind of think, what do I know? What do I want to know? And then what am I'm going to not say learned, but like, what am I learning as I'm going through this?
I would ditto that. I also like the UNESCO resources. I felt like it helped me frame some of my thinking around conversations I have with teachers and then teachers with students on how they're using AI. And something about this chapter that kept coming back to me, and I can't remember if I heard Matt say this in person. I feel like he's the one who said it, and Ken Shelton has echoed it too. It's just that faster isn't always better. And I think a lot of us see AI as a way to make things more efficient for us, which it certainly can do. And I know I've used it in that sense, but I think it's still important that we have that human in the loop and then we realize that the data sets aren't perfect. So when we're doing things faster, it's not always going to be the output that we want. And you have to know how the tool works to get better outputs and then leverage it appropriately or in ways that do hopefully more good versus harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also mentioned in my notes the UNESCO recommendations because I wasn't aware of that either. And I found that fascinating. And I am going to go back and pick through that and see, because one of the questions that we're all being asked and having to answer is what policies, what guidelines, what things we're going to have for our corporations. And a lot of times we're kind of waiting on someone else to do something. And I didn't know that was there. But also this chapter really speaks to the things that we have to be aware of on behalf of our students or on behalf of our corporations. What's the source of the data in the data training models? We know there are gaps. We know there's bias. We know there's inaccuracy because we're humans and humans are creating it. What data is being collected? Is it personally identifiable information? Does it meet COPPA standards? How's it being used? The big one that he talked about was who's writing the algorithm. And that quote from Ken Shelton in there, again, he does this to me a lot. He puts things in there that who benefits from the definition of AI as an intelligence? Who are the humans in the loop? To me, that perspective really matters. The education of the people involved really matters. The diversity of opinion and life experience really matter. As I used to say about my 7th graders, we're going to bring them in and love them, warts and all, right? We need everybody in that conversation because we should all be benefiting from that. But probably the biggest thing that I pulled from this section was that ongoing conversation that we have to have about the equity considerations, which is, kind of where Ken Shelton lives. Does everybody get a device? Do the devices stay at school or do they go home? And what equity situations are we creating there where there might not be one? A big one that I learned from a teacher just the other day from her students was they said, hey, you've made this great room for us to use to study and prepare. Leave it open. Let us access it when we're not at school. And that, that makes sense. I understand why, because they don't have access to her if they're not with her, but now they can because of the knowledge base that she built in that particular room. So those are some highlights for me.
Mm-hmm. I began thinking about, as we're talking about the equity issue, is how AI has become this almost like your personal beliefs. Like it's tied so much to your morals and your ethics, like how much I want my kids to use it, how much I'm going to use it. Like it's really based so much. It's not like, picking up a calculator or even picking up a phone. Like we don't think twice about using those things, but like there's so much ethics tied to, am I going to use AI? Is it okay? I just find that interesting that it's really tied to personal beliefs and like your integrity and that kind of thing as you're having conversations with people about where they stand on these issues and how much they're willing to leverage the tool.
I loved the Wizard of Oz reference when it was like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, and I started thinking of myself as like Dorothy. Like by the time I've, attempted something or accepted the AI into my, project or whatever's being asked of me to do. It's like, I had the tools the whole time, like it was always within me, So I loved that, Matt Miller kind of brought that to light too. I always want to let my teachers know, like, you are fully prepared and capable, AI tool, device, technology, like, or not. It just helps the experience, possibly be more unique, possibly be, completed a little bit in a faster time frame or with a different lens, or to know something that maybe you didn't know. But it just made me giggle.
Yeah, Nicole, your discussion of ethics and morals, one thing that I just came across, I'd read it before, but I hadn't put a lot of time into it. The vast amount of energy that we are expending as a world on AI, especially for image generation, is becoming a real environmental concern. And so that's one that I don't know that was discussed in either of these books in detail, but it's one that I think is going to be a big point moving forward as we look at these systems, worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Probably because of when the books were written. I mean, things have moved so fast.
Yeah.
And that's interesting conversations to have with your students too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know, when I start thinking about things like that, then I start spiraling and I'm like, oh my gosh, what about the energy that's hosting this live stream right now? What about my device? And then it's just like, oh my gosh. And then I need to take a minute and do a lap, like Tim says, when he reads parts of this book where it's just mind altering and earth shattering in some of the things that you realize. But I think those are really important questions, and almost lends itself to some of the other pieces that Matt kind of brings up in this book about, like, how can we have those conversations, but then also see AI as a way to, like, frame things for good for students and as powerful change agents and ways to empower our students. I think sometimes I worked in middle school and high school, so mainly teenagers, and I don't think we always give the younger generations enough credit on what they're excited about, what they're motivated about, and things that they want to do to better their community. And maybe these tools can help empower them in ways that aren't currently being met.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into Chapter 7.
Yeah.
Chapter 7 is preparing students for an AI integrated world. So, Brenny, there you go, knocking it out of the park. So I'll ask all of you, at this point, knowing what you know, and we know that's changing daily, how would you define responsible AI use for students?
I mean, I think of the reputable use policy or responsible use policy, that we ask kids to sign in the beginning of the year with, like, their device, with their actions online. And I think about this AI tool as exactly that. Like, it's a learning tool, specifically in the education world, right? It's a tool that with great power comes great responsibility. And so, oftentimes, and maybe this is the elementary person in me, like, treat others the way that you would want to be treated. So when you're using the AI tool, or if your teacher opens up a room or a bot or something, whatever the terminology might be, you are approaching it with the same care and respect that you would if your teacher was in a small group with you and he or she was acting as the resource, or you were leading, some area in person. So that's kind of where my brain first went. And then ultimately, like, what do you do? Who do you tell? Like, where do you go? Or how do you know if what you're getting back from your search or from your prompt is incorrect or does have a bias? And how do you have those conversations, and who do you go to as a student? That was super, I don't know, it just kind of made my wheels turn on that, thinking about having a high school kid and a junior high kiddo. I was like, do they know how to detect, like, this doesn't sound right, or that doesn't look right? And then who do you talk to about that? Like, do we have that skill set as educators to have those conversations with students?
Mm-hmm. I always find it interesting when I'm in a chat and I'm reading something that pops up that doesn't sound right. And so I'll say, I'll type back, I don't think this sounds right. I don't think that this is correct. And it'll immediately respond, oh, you're right. Like, do our students know how to challenge the authority of the bot, right? And say, this doesn't sound right. I'm not okay with this. It's almost like, we've taught them that the teacher is the authority in the room. Like, are they taking everything at face value, or it is kind of a learning curve to be okay asking questions and challenging the bot.
Yeah. Yeah, because ultimately, as a human, like, it is up to you. You do have those, that power, those skills to say, it doesn't sit well with me. And same like as, maybe like the four of us, maybe one of us brings up a point. It's like, you know what? I need to think more about that. Or have you thought of? And so to be able to type that as opposed to say that, I think of that as being like responsible use. I think of, obviously, the obvious of using it for what your teacher or the assignment has been geared to be used for. So not for just, what's the weirdest flavor of Skittle I can make, unless it's like, some kind of a science or, creative writing sample, using that tool that the school has provided for what you're supposed to be using it for. I know one thing that they talked about was heavy usage. When you notice children are using it just too much for classwork, it's an immediate crutch. And I think about that in the classroom, the ask 3 before me. So possibly, before you go to whatever AI tool is available, or if you're within the AI, and Nicole, like you had said, as opposed to just taking the first answer, at face value, what are your 3 before me that you can use to grow the response, to challenge the response, to question? I thought that was an interesting thing to think about.
I would say ditto to everything that's been said. But I think what you all have said is just showing that a part of this definition of responsible use is bringing students into the conversation and helping them define what that is, but then modeling how to ask these questions and to challenge AI. And that a part of that responsible use is kind of telling them, this is going to get sticky. It's not a clear, this is a great example, wonderful output that it gives you, because these tools are changing. The ways that we're using them is changing. So it's hard to say an exact definition because it's evolving. And I think that's what we need to make clear for our students and show them that you need to question these tools. You need to challenge the outputs and get clarity on what it's good at, what it's not good at, and obviously kind of create that good discourse between the students and the teachers.
Yeah.
I remember having a coach tell me once, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I feel that way a lot with AI. We have some things now. There's that new thing out there, the AI Trust You, which is very interesting just because it allows the teacher and the student up front to say, here's when you can, or here's when I did use AI. So the conversation is not about blame or misuse. It's about, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Our own high school students at Richmond High School said, one of them said the other day, and this was in particular about Magic School, but she said, if I want a thought partner, I will go to Magic School. If I just need an answer, I can go to ChatGPT. So it's that thought partner versus answer machine conversation that I want to have with kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting.
One of the things that we're doing right now with some of our fourth graders is like a Genius Hour type activity. And it was so fascinating to see them move through the steps of identifying interests, identifying topics, identifying questions that they have, and then kind of mashing it up together. And now we're in the research phase, right? Well, the reason I share all of that is that one of my kiddos came up with a question and put it into Google, and what was returned looked like a return that we would see on ChatGPT or Magic School or any other AI tool or software. And the kiddo looked at me and he was like, I thought AI was turned off. And I was like, oh, I'm like, kindly step away from the child. And I was like, okay, tell me more. He goes, this just like returned a whole thing. And he's like, and I can give it a thumb up or thumb down. He's like, what should I do? It was so funny. And so we were talking through that, and, you know, just the little conversation of what are some resources that we can go to get some answers. And Google just happened to be one of them. And so that just happened to be used. And so then a conversation about AI just happened to come up. So I just encourage teachers to, you know, provide experiences and have that safe environment that, you know, where you've built relationships with your kiddos, that they can feel like they can be like, hey,
Yeah.
you know, that to me also falls under that responsible use. But, you know, I was looking at this part in the chapter that Matt Miller wrote about AI to take action. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because, I mean, like I said, I'm doing that right now with kiddos, but I'm loving that they feel like they have this thought partner, this like brain trust that they can have is just sort of like one shoulder, one opinion, one idea maybe, or maybe many ideas. But yeah, I thought maybe if anybody had anything to add about that, I was just really curious if anybody's seen that.
Yeah, I love that, because to me, that was the moment when these two books came together.
Okay.
If you think about Ethan Malick's book, one of the things he said in a nutshell was, if your plan doesn't scare you a little or seem impossible, it's not big enough. And AI really gives you a chance to do that.
Yeah.
You know, give me 5 reasons why this is going to work so well, and maybe 5 reasons why it won't, and let's see what it spits out. So yeah, that was a kind of a coalescing moment for me between these two books when I read that.
Yeah, I had made a note of that too, that I was kind of inspired by the end of this book with the last couple pages. I was like, really, we're limited by our creativity. Like, you've got this tool that will return anything that you're willing to ask it, right? So we're limited by like the questions that of our own imagination. How big is the question? There is no question that's too big that the AI can't help us at least come up with some ideas around. So yeah, I was inspired to ask bigger questions, as you were saying, Tim.
Agreed. And I felt like that was the perfect convergence of both books too. That's like, oh my gosh, perfect moment where multiple quotes are basically interweaving together. Mm-hmm. And I think the nice thing with using AI as a thought partner is, and maybe it's because I was kind of a shy student in school, and then I taught middle school students, 7th grade, and like they're afraid to raise their hands sometimes and share their ideas. And this gives them a space to feel like they can do that without judgment or nervousness, because it's not a human, right? That's the benefit of it in that sense, is that it's not a person they feel is going to judge them for an idea or a question that they have. So that's where it kind of has that benefit versus, always saying something aloud in class. We certainly need to have those opportunities too. But I think sometimes that's the support that some of our students need. And I love that this can be an avenue to spark even more ideas and push our creativity to different ways that we haven't thought of before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That seems like a perfect place to wrap this up. Put a bow on it. We'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. As always, we have a few questions for you to consider before we sign off. One of them is, how can educators make small shifts to leverage AI as a creative partner to develop more engaging lessons or projects? So right from you to your students. What are examples of ways we can all maintain our human voice, even with an AI thought partner? And then what's one example from today that you could use with your students tomorrow? So ponder these questions and let us know your responses. We all work as in some extent for Keep Indiana Learning as innovation coaches, so you can always reach us there. And we've had many amazing discussions and opportunities to share ideas through this whole semester related to these two books. And so you can find this episode and the other 9 episodes on the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube channel. Side note, did you know that you can earn PGPs at the site on the screen right down there once you've watched all the episodes. 10 PGPs for the series. So head on over there to keepindianalearning.org/PGP. Find out more and get your points. Well, thank you to Nicole and Amy for joining us today. And thank you to Brenny for being an amazing co-pilot on this series. And for Marty for all her work behind the scenes. And finally, thank you so much for being on this journey with us.